It's time for League of Legends items part 3. We're going over the quote unquote fighter items according to League of Legends item shop. So I'm actually not going to go over Eclipse because I will go over it with the assassin items. So we'll start with Gore Drinker. Gore Drinker is gives I think like 45 AD, maybe 200 to 400 HP, and then like 200% health regen. And it has this active ability that is every 15 seconds where it does like a cleave effect around you that heals you based off your missing health per champion you hit. Kind of like a Darius Q, except for the inside part heals and there is no outside part for the range. But anyway, so the mythic passive of the Gore Drinker is it gives 5 ability haste per legendary item, and the cool thing about that is Gore Drinker's item active effect goes down with ability haste as well as item haste. So if you get enough ability haste, you can get the Gore Drinker passive down to like 10 seconds. So Gore Drinker is a good item to go into teams that don't that'll can burst you down pretty quick, but not that don't have hard CC where you'll still be able to get the active effect off. Because the problem is if you can't get the active effect off, it's just useless because it has no healing besides that. It's really good on champions like Aatrox or Olaf, where you like going in low HP and then turning around by getting a lot of health back, and you rely on the healing. Next, you have Stride Breaker. I think that's what it's called. It gives some attack speed, some AD, health and health regen, and it has a active effect where you do this little jump. It's not really a jump. You basically just move forward a step, and it has this huge area of effect that slows enemies and deals damage. This is good for champions that like running the enemy down, like running towards the enemy and catching them out, like Set or Volibear. You can run close to them with like your Q because it gives you speed, and then you can slow people in an area so Set could get his E off, or Volley can get his Q auto off the stun. Next, you have Divine Sunderer. Divine Sunderer is really good anti-tank item, but it can do more than just anti-tank. It has a Spellblade effect, which is the Sheen effect, where after you use this spell, your next auto does a bonus damage, which is 10% of 10% max HP of the enemy, which obviously is anti-tank. It gives some AD, some health, and some health regeneration. And the mythic passive of Divine Sunder is 5% armor pen and 5% magic pen per item. So it's good for champions that have mixed damage, but it's also just it can really work well with pure AD damagers dealers too. The not Divine Sunder, Stridebaker passive, mythic passive that I missed was I'm pretty sure it's 3% movement speed. Then next you have Trinity Force or Triforce, which gives attack speed, AD, and HP. I think that's it. So the item itself gives you some bonus 8% AD, stacking up to 5 times every time you attack an enemy. I think it's like 6% per stack. You also get an attack, a Spellblade passive that does a lot of bonus AD, but it's based off your AD, not the enemy's max HP like Divine Sunderer. And the mythic passive is 10% attack speed per legendary item. So first we'll go into the upgraded Executioner's Calling. Who knows what this thing's called? It doesn't really matter. This is just a item you'll build if the enemy team has a lot of healing because it's upgraded out of Xy's Calling. It's different than, I think, what is it? Is it Mortal Reminder? Where Mortal Reminder gives crit while this one gives HP instead. This item also gives some ability haste and more AD. And yes. Then you have GA, which we all know what GA does. This item, you'll know when to build it or not. Then Guinsoo's is an item that I would recommend not building unless you're planning on building a little bit more crit because its passive is useless, really. It's just 40 on hit, 40 physical on hit damage. If you only have the Guinsus with 40% attack speed and there's better items you could build to give you attack speed if you're not actually building crit, then you have the fighter version of upgraded Quicksilver sash, which just gives you HP and some damage. And the active for this item is, I think it gives you like bonus tenacity and also lets you remove the CC effect for a few seconds. Then you have Ma Malmortius, which just gives. This is good for teams that have high burst damage when it comes to magic, and you want to block that. So the component to Ma is Hex Drinker, and sometimes when you're laning into a pretty strong AP matchup, you will build Hex Drinker first item if you're an AD character, just so you have a little bit more survivability. But that you should only build the Hex Drinker if you're planning on actually building this. And if you build the Hex Drinker, don't rush the Maw. Just get the Hex Drinker and then go your Mythic or whatever core item. It could be Ravenous Hydra, you know. Next is Wit's End. Wit's End is a pretty decent item. It's not as good as it was last season because it doesn't give the healing. It just gives AD, attack speed, some magic resist, and on-hit magic damage that scales with level. Then you have Death Stance. Death Stance doesn't give the same healing it did last season, but instead you reduce the physical damage that you take by a said percentage, bonus percentage if you're melee, less percentage if you're ranged. And if you get a takedown, you recover all that HP plus 10% of your max HP. I think it's max HP, not missing. Then you have Stair's Gauge. Stair's Gauge has an effect where after you deal physical damage, you heal and you get a stack. And then when you take the set amount of damage, like last season, you get a shield that is based off the amount of stacks you have. It just gives AD and health. This item's really good into if you want that shield to help you. If you heal a lot, this item's really good because you get the shield and then you can heal the full with that shield while tanking. Then you have Blade of the Ruin King, which instead of having the active ability, it has this passive active ability that after you auto attack someone 3 times, you steal their movement speed. Uh, and it has the same lifesteal, attack damage, and attack speed as before, and the on hit damage that's based off HP, but the on hit damage was reduced to probably, I think, like 10% and 6% for melee and range, respectively, compared to last season's 12 and 8%. Then we have Ravenous Hydra, one of the strongest items in the game, in my opinion. It gives you 15% Omnivamp, which means you can healing off of all damage. It lets your spells and your attacks do the Tiamat effect. It also gives you ability haste 20, I believe, and a solid 55 or 65 AD. This item's really good on like Fiora and Camille, so they get a lot of healing for their damage. But it also can be used on some AP champions, even if they don't have any AD scaling, just because of the healing it does. Uh, Next, you have Black Cleaver, which is pretty much the same as last season with the 25 ability haste, 40 AD, and I think maybe 300, 400 HP. Uh, it reduces the armor of whoever you hit by 4% every time you deal physical damage. This stacks up to 20, or not, I think it's 6%, something like that. It stacks up to 24% total, and once they have that full 24%, every time you deal damage, they take 5% missing HP damage. So this is really good on champions that all hit a lot, and it's not like burst oriented. So like Camille wouldn't build this item, but say Lucian, who auto attacks a lot, or Garen, whose E hits multiple times, really good on him. Next, you have Titanic Hydra, which gives you HP, AD, and bonus AD per 1% HP you have. Its cleave effect is different than the cleave effect of Tiamat and Hydra, where it hits in a cone and it hits for a certain damage, a little bit bonus damage to the one it's targeting, and then even more damage to the enemies behind it, but it's still going to be less than what the auto attack does. Next, you have Shreldy's Grudge, I'm pretty sure this is called, which gives like 45 AD, 30% armor pen, and 30 ability haste. This item is really good when you want to slow your enemies, because there's not a lot of, besides black, wait, no, that's not what it's called, Bork, there's not a lot of AD items that will help you slow, and well, there's also a Stride Breaker. So this is good for champions that auto attack and will want to kite or chase down people, but they're AD. So like Gnar can use this item really well, or some ADCs depending on what you're building. And so these are the fighter items. Hopefully that helps you. Death Stance not the same. Remember, Death Stance is not the same as last season, so don't think it's the best item. This is basically the new Death Stance. Ravenous Hydra is. Wit's End doesn't give healing anymore, so there's a lot better options to build unless you really need to have mixed damage with your AD. Gwynsu's doesn't have that stacking effect where after every auto you get more attack speed, so unless you're building crit, it's not the best item. The two Hydras don't have an active. Bork doesn't have an active. Uh, Executioner's Calling can upgrade into this. Yada yada. This is upgraded Gwynsu, or not Quicksilver, and that should be good. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't like or comment. That would be helpful. And goodbye.